Hey everybody, Adam from the Army Painter here. Today we're going to showcase some new tools from the Army Painter range. I'm very excited about the Masterclass Drybrush range. We're going to do some dry brushing and some stippling on a vehicle that's a part of my Philadelphia custom chapter that I've been painting up for all of the fans as part of my monthly goals on the Hobby Brigade, a new Facebook group that we've started for all of our fans, friends, and fellow hobbyists out there. The Masterclass brushes are fantastic for pulling off all different kinds of techniques. Obviously, dry brushing, push blending, and stippling. We're going to use a bunch of these techniques in this video. I love these dome-shaped goat hair bristles. You're going to love them too. Tune in as we showcase how to get really realistic and quick effects using the new Masterclass dry brush range. As you can see, I began by already laying down the base coats on the model using the brand new airbrush medium to help pull off some simple gradation across the model. For this first round of highlights, I'm using the Mighty Dry Brush. This is the largest dry brush in the lot, and I'm going back with one of the middle tones that I used when I was airbrushing. Right now, this is actually a 50-50 mix of Kraken Skin and Elemental Bolt. And I'm just going to go find the edges that are sticking out across the model, the details sticking out across the model, and I'm just going to very lightly flick, and you see that just flicking the bristles of this Mighty Dry Brush across the edges. Using the Mighty Dry Brush to pull out these highlights on the model gives a very realistic and soft weathered edge, and I really like, and you're really going to like, how this turns out as we progress along this model. If you've been following along with my Philadelphia project, you do know that I do like to weather my models a bit, and the Masterclass dry brushes are exceptional at pulling off some really cool weathering effects and textures on the model. As you can see here, I've added just a couple bits of stippling with that first highlight on these side panels before moving on to our final highlight with the dry brush. We're still using the Mighty Dry Brush, but this time I have pure Kraken Skin, and I'm just going to find the very most extreme edges, and you can see here I'm barely just tracing the tip of the bristles on this Mighty Dry Brush across those edges, and I'm getting a very quick and effective highlight. It is a little bit of a rough highlight, and that's what we're going for. I want this tank to look like it's been in battle for many centuries. It's been used over time. It's won many battles, taking down many enemy tanks and knights and big monsters with its big main cannon. And I'm just going to find those areas where I added that textural bit, and this is kind of like the pre-elements of the weathering. I'm going to reinforce that with this brighter tone. Especially on these big models, you want to make sure that you give it a good 360 look. Make sure that you're picking out all of the details as best you can. Take your time. Be patient. While this does save you loads of time just using the dry brush as opposed to a standard edge highlighting technique, you still want to make sure that you find all of those hard to reach spaces and pick out those fine details on the model. I'm just repeating these steps along the other side of the model, again with the Kraken Skin, our brightest highlight tone, and we're just tracing this across the hardest edges and the most raised edges on this tank model. Now, many people like a finer highlight, and you can do that too. Once you're done with this step, you can go back with a standard bristle brush and apply that fine edge highlight. But for many people, this highlight will be perfect, and you can call the model complete after painting in the rest of the model. While the Masterclass Drybrush range is obviously very great at achieving ultra-realistic highlights on your model, it's also great for some other techniques like stippling and push blending. We're going to showcase a few of those now. As you can see, I'm going to be painting in a panel on this tank. Now, before applying any type of hobby tape or masking tape to your model, you want to be sure that you give it 1 or 2 clean coats of our anti-shine matte varnish, either through an airbrush or using our color primer spray. That's going to protect all your hard work underneath. And now I've just got pure angel green, and I've applied this to the moderate dry brush, and I'm just going to stipple this on. What I'm essentially trying to do is add a textured panel here. I could go ahead and do this with the airbrush, but I really want to get that textural element using this Masterclass dry brush. I'm going to follow along and just apply this. You'll notice that it is a bit see-through in some areas, and I'm leaving some of the base tone underneath. That's okay. That's what we're going for here. I want to let some of the undertone, that the original paint underneath, to show through so that we can really pull off this weathered effect when we get to the end of this project. We're just applying this all over this panel area, careful not to get it outside of the areas that we've taped in. And once you get that solid base tone in, you can actually push, and this is what I call push blending. Once you've stippled on the areas that you want to, you can fill in some of those areas and just push the paint and work the paint off the bristles into the area you want to paint. Now for the next step, I've taken a little bit of Wizard's Orb and I've mixed this in. I left the angel green in the bristles of the brush, so this is almost like a blended highlight. And what I'm doing with this mixture of paints is I'm just working it into the uppermost areas and the centermost areas of these panels. I really want this to be a subtle tone. You'll see it once we've stripped this paint off. It's going to be a pretty stark contrast, but I want it to play with some muted colors, stay within this minty seafoam green theme that I have for the army. And next, I am taking pure elemental bolt and I'm just focusing in on the raised areas, the hard edges of the panel. And you'll see when there's more paint on the brush, I focus on that edge, and then I'm going to go back lightly and stipple it back in, work it back in and over top. This pulls off a really nice layered effect that you cannot achieve with any other brush, not even an airbrush. I mean, I suppose you could do it with a smaller standard bristle brush, but it would take you ages to pull off effectively. So I'm just focusing this second highlight, this second color in the center and uppermost areas. This panel here showcases it really well. I start right on that hard edge on the model and then work my way down and inside the middle, leaving that initial blended area, that darker color in the bottom, in the recesses and lower parts of the panels. We're going to be working up several different layers of this shade as we go through this panel process. So it's okay if we have some of that original angel green showing through, if we have some of that initial mix of the angel green and Wizard's Orb showing. It's okay, that's what we want. We really want to work up the textural levels of this color. As we apply this second layer, you can really see this effect begin to take shape. It's almost like a marbled paint or a marbled look. And I would suggest that if anybody's trying to paint a marble effect at home, that the Masterclass Drybrush would be the perfect selection to do just that. Now I'm taking this pure Wizard's Orb and I'm just focusing on the hard edges, the uppermost areas of the model, like here on the top of this panel, reinforcing this color, slowly building up the effect, slowly building that transition. I'm really liking how this is beginning to look. Then I'm just going to take that same color and like we did earlier with Kraken Skin, we're just going to add a dry brush highlight to the outermost and uppermost edges on the tank. To continue on with the weathered effect that we're going for, I'm going back to almost the same tone as the base tone. This is a 50-50 mix approximately of our elemental bolt and our Kraken Skin, and I'm just very, very judiciously applying a little bit right on the edge where the tape mark meets the panel line. And I'm just going to apply this here because this is going to add to the effect that this panel is starting to weather and strip off the model after eons and decades and centuries at war. This is just one small step that's really going to go a long way in the overall effect that we're trying to achieve with this model. And then again, I'm just going to add a slight dry brush to these hard edges at the top of the model. Now we're moving away from the dry brushes, and I just wanted to showcase how we really tie this all together. Now I have, I believe this is my character brush, and with a very thin down application of that same 50-50 mix of elemental bolt and Kraken Skin, I'm going to reinforce some of those areas that we stippled on with our miniature dry brush. I'm going to trace in here some streaking effects and some wears and tears and chipping effects, just to add to the overall weathered theme that we're going for. I'll do this to this panel here, and I'll also apply this similar technique across the rest of the model. So if maybe you went a little overboard with your dry brushing, this is one simple way to correct that mistake, make that happy little accident look like a very smart decision. You just add to the weathering in those areas. So very simply with thin down paints, just tracing in some extra weathering on the model. And now the moment that we've all been waiting for, we get to pull off our hobby tape from the model. And look at that, it looks really cool. This is so satisfying to watch you peel the tape off of your model. after all that hard work. Of course, we're going to go back in and we're going to add some browns and some metallics into those chipping areas, those weathered areas on the model, but I really like the overall effect that we were able to pull off stippling and push blending this panel on our tank. Now that we've finished off that panel showcasing the stippling and push blending techniques, I want to show you how well these brushes work when you're dry brushing metallics. I've already pre-painted all of the metallic tones on the model, and I'm just going to take our mighty dry brush and begin to work up those highlights now. I base coated all of the metallic areas in Warpaint's Gunmetal Metallics and then gave it a wash with Quick Shade Dark Tone. I let that dry, and now with Plate Mail Metal, just very simply with my moderate dry brush in circular, very light motions, I'm just picking out the metallic areas. And you can see it adds almost a very fine edge highlight to these hard metallic edges. Very simple. This is the easiest I've probably ever painted metallics in my history painting models. I went ahead and finished off the rest of the model, and as you can see, I added the final details, adding that dirt spatter brown paint to the chipping areas and the weathered areas on the model. I really love this new release from the Army Painter. The Masterclass Drybrush set allows you to experiment and push your range of techniques like stippling, wet blending, and of course dry brushing. I can't wait to see what you all do with this new release once you're able to get your hands on them. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial as much as I enjoyed painting up this model for you today. You can tune in to the Hobby Brigade on Facebook to see more of my progress pics for this army and also some photos from your fellow hobbyists from around the world. Remember that the magic in miniature painting is that it can be as simple or as challenging as you want it to be, but with the right techniques, you're sure to achieve some great results. We'll see you next time.